We are here now with State Senator Morgan Lamantia on KEDT, your community-owned station. She represents Senate District 27 and is running for re-election. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thank you so much for having us and inviting us here today, Spencer. Really appreciate it.
When you ran in 2022, it was for a 2-year term. This would be a 4-year term. What's your mindset like thinking about doubling the amount of time you'd have? Do you view it differently?
Absolutely. It really does change my mindset, mine from going forward into the future, because when we're successful after this election in November and we have that 4-year term, that means during 2026, we're going to have the time to really get out there even more so and talk to people and really go deep into a lot of these issues, go deep into the weeds on some of these issues, whether it's water when it comes to drought or when it comes to drainage, when it comes to what our agriculture and our farmers and our ranchers need. Because some of those topics get incredibly complicated. And when it comes to school finance, it's almost like you need a PhD to really understand how that works. And so being able to delve into those issues and how they change and are so unique given the area or the industry you're talking to or the different parts, whether you're on the coast or further inland, I think it's incredibly different. And so being able to have the time to really get in on those issues and start building and creating a bill that is going to address those in a real comprehensive way, it takes a lot of time and it takes so much input from so many people, not just in South Texas or the Coastal Bend, but across the state as well. And that's what I'm really looking forward to doing in 2026, is getting in depth on some of these more complicated issues so that we can have a true impact in those areas.
Certainly one thing impacting a lot of the Coastal Bend, TWIA hikes coming up next year.
Absolutely.
Just your thoughts, and for people that are feeling it, what would you tell them?
We are working on it. So I was at the TWIA meeting when they were talking about and deciding whether or not to have those TWIA hikes and taking that vote, and strongly argued against that TWIA hike. We were there at the Texas Department of Insurance meeting that they had recently in Corpus, because there's still a chance for the commissioner for the Texas Department of Insurance to veto that rate hike. And we strongly argued and asked for them to do that, because right now is just not the time to take those rate hikes when it comes to windstorm insurance. What a lot of the rest of the state of Texas doesn't understand is that when you live on the coast, our windstorm insurance rates are sometimes twice as much as our property taxes. And that's just one element of our homeowners insurance. And it has a huge impact on our businesses, on the affordability of our homes, and on our school districts as well. I've got a school district who pays 1/3 of their basic allotment on windstorm insurance alone. It's not affordable and it's not sustainable. And that's something that we are continuing to fight, and we're going to address next session. This past session, we had a bill that was going to have a huge impact in bringing down windstorm insurance costs. But at the last minute, we weren't able to get it through. It got changed and into a way that it was no longer going to do or accomplish the goal that we wanted to accomplish, which was lowering rates. So it didn't get across the finish line. But next session, we're going to push just as hard, because we really, really need to take a stance on that and bring down those windstorm insurance rates.
What are changes you'd like to see with windstorm insurance and just access to it, certain companies not offering it here in the Coastal Bend region? Is there anything you think that the state could do to help lower costs or give people more opportunities in the private sector to pick a windstorm insurer?
Absolutely. So when it comes to windstorm insurance in the private sector, companies can decide whether or not they want to offer it and how many lines of insurance they want to offer and how much of a risk they want to take on the coastal area. And then the state has TWIA, which is the insurance of last resort. So if you do not have the ability to find a private insurer, you can get insurance through TWIA. Thing is that those TWIA rates are incredibly expensive. And so what we're working on and what we worked on last session and we'll continue to work on next session is, instead of having those costs of the windstorm insurance rates being borne solely on the shoulders of the ratepayers and those that live on the coast, but having that shared throughout the state, because the rest of the state benefits from our coast. They benefit from the tourism our coastal communities attract. I represent Port Aransas all the way down South Padre Island, the best beaches in Texas. And people all over the state, all over the country come to visit our beaches. That's something that the whole state benefits from. They benefit from the energy we produce here in our coastal regions. They benefit from the import and export and the goods we bring in through our ports of entry and through our shrimpers and our fisheries and our oysters as well. So the rest of the state is going to be able to chip in to help us really shore up and make sure TWIA is fully funded so we can cover those costs. And that way we don't have to raise premiums and raise rates on those that live here. which pushes people out of the coast and is going to have a huge impact on the education, on the businesses that are here on the coastal areas if we don't do something about it. And that's something that we're planning on doing as a state.
From housing to health insurance, parts of District 27 are dealing with healthcare deserts. How would you like to see people able to go to the doctor when they need to? What steps are you trying to take forward in that direction?
Having affordable and accessible healthcare is incredibly important. Just like you said, we have such large healthcare deserts, especially mental health care deserts here in South Texas and the Coastal Bend. And that's something that we really need to address, and it needs to be at the forefront. We're working with Texas A&M. They have an amazing rural healthcare program. A&M Kingsville is taking some big steps in that area, creating a program that specifically educates nurses on the rural areas. Texas A&M system is including in the residency programs 2 weeks or multiple weeks where these residents will go to rural clinics to experience that, because for many, their residency programs consist of hospitals in big cities, and they don't get that exposure to what a rural doctor's office is like. And for many, it's an amazing experience and one that they want to pursue in their careers once they're exposed to it. So I think those are two avenues that are really going to help. So the state can assist in that by assisting with the costs of having students perform residencies in rural areas, making sure that they have a place to stay, because not a lot of these smaller towns don't always have dorm rooms for them to stay at, helping with transportation, but also continuing to incentivize doctors in rural or underserved areas by covering tuition costs and helping them with their student loans.
What would be the plan to help pay for some of the things that you've discussed?
It would be, right now we are going to next session with about a $20 billion surplus. So covering all the other state programs that we currently have at the current amount, we'll have $20 billion left over. So hopefully we can use some of that money, not all of it, but some of that money to pay for these programs, to incentivize medical students to go to our rural areas. Another big aspect of it would be, and this is something we're continuing to push, is to ask the federal government to increase the funding that they have for residents at our hospitals here in the state of Texas. The amount of spots, resident spots for our hospitals that the federal government pays for has been basically frozen since the 80s or late 80s, early 90s. But since our growth has just skyrocketed, we need to have more doctors. And though our schools are graduating more medical students, there's not enough resident slots to be offered to all of those students that are graduating from medical schools. So we need to increase our residency program slots as well.
On to education, certainly something you've championed. For those who don't know, explain what you've worked on in the Senate and what you'd like to see going forward.
So last session, we worked really hard to try to, one, increase teacher pay raises, because our teachers are amazing and they do a great job, but their workload is insane. If you talk to any teachers, if you know a teacher and you talk to them about what they do day to day, it's amazing what they're able to accomplish and the impact they can have on a student's life. But they are bogged down with so much additional paperwork, additional training, and required to teach the test, and it takes away a lot of their day-to-day time being able just to teach, to do what they intended to do when they became a teacher, to do what they love, and to teach kids critical thinking skills and make sure that they understand the subjects, because there's so much else that they're required to do as well. So we need to make sure we pay our teachers more and we show them that we value them as professionals that they are, but also that we make sure our schools have the funding that they need. We need to increase their basic allotment. The basic allotment is just the basic amount that the state pays to a school district for every day a student is at school throughout a school year. And that has not increased in a very long time. Costs are rising, insurance costs are rising, which we just mentioned, and we're not giving them enough money to really afford that. We're also requiring them to have more safety requirements, which is wonderful. We want to make sure all of our schools are as safe as they can be, but we're not funding them at a level to where they can afford the safety requirements, even the minimum requirements that we're requiring as a state. And that's something we need to address. We need to make sure our schools have the funding necessary to pay our teachers what they deserve, keep our kids, our teachers, and everyone at our schools safe, but also make sure that our kids have access to the latest technology and information and tools so that they can become the future leaders of our state.
Final topic, border security. Operation Lone Star certainly has caused a stir between the federal and state government. What do you think the state role should be?
Border security and our law enforcement are absolutely important, and one of the most important aspects of living here in South Texas and living along the border as well. And I think a lot of times the news media and the national media, they don't get it right. It's either they picture us as being a war zone and people are scared to come down to the border because they think we're being fired upon, or, people are, their lives are at risk. We're communities, we're families, we have neighborhoods and schools right along the border that live peacefully. But we're also, we can't ignore the problem. There is an issue with immigration. There is an issue with crime and the cartels and drug crossings there. And we need to address it, but we need to address it in reality. And I think Operation Lone Star has done a great job in making sure our law enforcement in these areas, especially our rural areas and our rural counties that don't have the resources that they need to really combat this issue, is incredibly important and has been such a boon for our area. And we need to keep up those types of programs. But when we are creating new programs along the border, we need to do it in conjunction with and working with our federal counterparts so that we are enhancing our border security as opposed to competing or conflicting or not working together and kind of doubling efforts one on top of each other and not being fiscally responsible. I think that's what's most important. And when we talk about the border, there's so many issues where money is being spent doing things that are going to grab a headline but isn't going to have that true impact. One of those examples is the fact that, we have an overgrowth of this invasive species called carrizo cane. Carrizo cane can grow to 15 feet. It is dense. You could be standing right next to someone and not even know it. And we need to mow it down and keep it from growing back, because otherwise our Border Patrol and our local law enforcement have no line of sight across the river. We've got hydrilla and hyacinth, which is another invasive plant species that grows like a carpet across our river, and boats can't get through. Our Border Patrol boats and our Texas Game Warden boats can't get through to patrol the river. That's something we also need to address, and that takes a lot of funding, but our funding isn't being used on those common sense necessary items that everyone in law enforcement, federal and local and state, agree needs to happen, because mowing the lawn doesn't always grab a headline, but it's something that's necessary. So I agree, Operation Lone Star has done some great things. Operation Lone Star has helped our law enforcement, which we need to support and give more resources to, but we need to do it in a way that has the biggest impact on what we're trying to do, which is keep our border, our communities, and our families safe.
Great, Senator. Thank you so much. Is there anything we haven't discussed today that you were hoping to?
No, I think you hit on a lot of really important issues. The only other issue I would say that is probably hopefully going to take a forefront in this coming session is water. We have a huge issue with droughts throughout the coastal bend and South Texas and many other areas of the state. And so hopefully we'll get a lot more money put in towards making sure we can withstand those drought conditions for our agriculture, our farmers, and our municipalities, and our industry and new businesses coming in. And that includes making sure we have water for drainage issues, because you've seen it now that you're living on the coast. If we get rain here and it's not in our watershed, our roads will flood, and it can make traveling and going to work or getting to the hospital in an emergency situation very difficult. So those are two sides of the same coin when it comes to water. We need to work on drainage and drought.
Great, Senator. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
This has been a KEDT election coverage special. Tune in to the KEDT 90.3 FM Mayoral Roundtable on October 30th at 9 a.m. And follow us on social media at Your KEDT on Facebook, Instagram, and X.